And particularly in this debate, and I've spoken a lot about oil and gas, particularly North Sea oil and gas, UK continental shelf oil and gas in this place, and it is because it is just so important, and it cannot be overestimated just how important it is to Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, to North East Scotland, and the result in Aberdeen South is a testament to that. We're not naive. We don't think that 50% of Aberdeen South suddenly have a huge love of the Conservative Party, although I'm sure they will eventually. It is because this was a referendum on oil and gas, and the new member put the point across perfectly that we must protect the sector, we must protect the jobs, we must protect the tax and investment that it returns, and our energy security. But knocking on doors in Aberdeen over the last 4 or 5 weeks, it's actually tragic the number of people I spoke to who have lost their jobs, and they're very willing to tell you about the job they had and the struggles they have now of finding a new one. Many of them are looking to move away because there is not a replacement job in Aberdeen. Many of them have young children who will also have to move away, and that's ruining friendships, it's ruining the future skills of Aberdeen, and it's changing the demographics of our region. And this does not have to happen. We do not have to run down the North Sea as quick as we are. The government does not have to ban new licences, that is a choice. The government does not have to keep the Energy Profits Levy, that is a choice. The government doesn't have to keep delaying on Rosebank and Jackdaw, that is also a choice. And it is a choice that they keep making the wrong decision on. And if anything, once we get the new Prime Minister, and undoubtedly a new, and let's hope, a new Energy Secretary, those choices will be different. Because the public want the position to change. 3/4 of the public support North Sea drilling, support North Sea production, if it means that we're going to import less. And the stats show that. If we maximise production from the North Sea, we could be using only 6% LNG by the mid-2030s. On the current trajectory, we'll be using 46% LNG. Again, that is a choice, and it's a choice that this government can choose to make. That LNG is more carbon intensive, so it's better to reach their climate goals. It costs a huge amount of money, and also it's supporting foreign jobs, not UK jobs. All of these, again, is the government's choice. It's up to them to change direction, and I'm delighted, and I'm actually very grateful for the number of Labour backbenchers here today and in private to me who are now saying that they want the government to change their position. They recognise there is a pragmatic path and that we need to be on it. When we are looking at the impact of the oil and gas sector, it's not just the direct jobs. I've met hauliers in my Gordon and Buchan constituency. I've met people who work in other industries in my Gordon and Buchan constituency, hospitality on the high streets and cafes, who have seen footfall and trade decrease because of the decrease in the oil and gas sector. This impacts everybody, and it's not just in the North East of Scotland. I will give way.
Yesterday we actually had the AGM of the Offshore Energy APPG, of which she is a member, and I hope that the new Member of Parliament will be joining us in that. One of the big issues that faces not just Scotland, but the whole of the UK and areas like the North East is the effect of the job losses is nationwide, not just in Scotland, but the people of Aberdeen have amplified how people feel across the country. Does she agree on that, and agree with what was said yesterday, that big companies, and the very biggest, are looking like pulling out of the North Sea altogether, and that would have an even more devastating effect?
No, I thank the honourable member, and I'd like to say friend for giving way. She's also a huge champion for this sector and for her constituents, and is completely correct. These job losses impact everybody. They impact everybody's constituents, and so everybody really should take note and take care about what is happening to the sector. And it's not just in the big producers or the operators, it's in the supply chain. Those supply chain companies are UK-wide. They must be protected UK-wide. They're also vital for the rollout of other renewable technologies, of nuclear. Our energy security into the future will be so much poorer without the supply chain. Without the supply chain, we will have less energy security. And I'll touch on two final things quickly. Rosebank and Jackdaw, Adura have submitted the additional information that is needed. When the Minister winds up, and I appreciate he'll probably say it's something to do with being quasi-judicial, but can he commit that there will not be any unnecessary delay to this? It does not have to be delayed for a new Prime Minister. It does not have to be delayed for a new Energy Secretary. These companies need confidence. The industry need confidence. And they need to know that these projects will go ahead as soon as possible. And on the Energy Independence Bill, the government deciding to write the ban on new licences into law is an absolute kick for the sector. They've already said this, but to put it into law drains any confidence that investors can have in the sector. So will the Minister please think again and not include this awful policy in that bill?
Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. And I'd like to begin, obviously, by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Broxbourne, for securing this important and indeed timely debate. And although I do think that his call that personal ambition should be left aside at this time has faint hope given what's happening on the opposition benches, this is surely a time for personal ambition to come to the fore. And I'm sure that we'll be seeing a lot more in the next few weeks in that regard. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome the newest Conservative Party Member of Parliament to this House, who secured an incredible majority in Aberdeen South last week, a referendum on the future of our oil and gas industry, won by those of us who support its continuance, won by those of us that support the jobs being maintained in this country, in that city and indeed in that region, and won by a real champion for that part of the world. And I'm sure that his voice, heard already here this morning, will be heard loud and clear over the next few months and years as he continues to champion that great city and that great industry as we move forward. I'd like to congratulate also and thank the member for Strangford, for Mansfield, for Moray West Nairn and Strathspey, for Nahealan and Yar, for Gordon and Buchan, for Stratford and Bow, and for Grangemouth for adding their voices to this debate today. And I think it was interesting, Ms Furness, that 3 of the 4 Labour Party speakers this morning actually spoke out in favour of a change of policy when it comes to this government's decisions on oil and gas. And whilst I've got a lot of time and respect, and indeed like the member for Stratford and Bow, I do disagree considerably with her. She's a passionate advocate for what she believes, and she's right to stand up in this House and make those arguments when it comes to the UK contributing to the battle against climate change. But what I would say to her is that when she describes those of us who care passionately about the existing oil and gas industry as somehow being climate deniers, she is somewhat insulting those people, those thousands of people in my constituency, in constituencies across the country, who rely on that industry for their income today, and indeed have the very skills that are going to be relied upon by those who are developing the technologies of the future. Because it is those supply chain industries, based in West Hill, in Portlethen, in Banchory, in Blackburn, in my constituency, and in places around the country in the northeast of England, who will be developing the offshore wind technologies of the future, or the floating solar technologies of the future, whatever it might be. It's those people in Nahealan and Yar and across the United Kingdom who you will be needing and you will be wanting to build quicker, as she seems to want to. Of course, I'd be delighted to give way.
Thank you for giving way. And you're making the case very, he's making the case very eloquently. To correct what I said, I'm not in any way accusing your wonderful constituents of being climate deniers. I am simply pointing out the case that made by some of your colleagues. I absolutely agree that we need to bring communities with us, and indeed, I'm sure that's a call the whole House shares.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. We do need to bring communities with us. And on that, whilst I thank my honourable friend for securing this debate today, it is, and I'm finding it increasingly frustrating, to have to be returning to this chamber, this House, to platforms across the UK, continuing to make the same arguments, as one of my constituents described it just the other week. It's like banging your head up against a brick wall, because I don't think any of us can really understand what it is that this government needs to see or needs to hear from experts, from trade unionists, from former leaders of the Labour Party, from leaders of Renewable Scotland and Renewables UK, from the chairman of Great British Energy established by this government less than 2 years ago, that are calling for, clamouring for, a change of direction, a change of position on the UK's oil and gas sector. My constituents, people across Scotland, people across the United Kingdom just do not understand why the government, at this time of constraint on our economy, do not understand why this government are voluntarily giving up on a potential £13 billion of additional revenue over the next decade. Why they insist, and indeed are about to legislate, for a ban on new licences in the North Sea, whilst increasing imports from Norway, who have just issued more licences in their sector of the North Sea, adding to the burden on climate change and indeed undermining our economy, losing British jobs in the process. They don't get why this government says, on the one hand, they are passionately committed to tackling global climate change and want to be global leaders in ensuring that this world is a safer place for our children, and yet are seemingly blind to the increased emissions that are produced by importing more of the oil and gas that we will need over the next 30 to 40 years from places like Qatar and the USA, and why they are seemingly treating workers in Aberdeen, the northeast of Scotland, Fife, the Northern Isles, Nahealan and Yar, the northeast of England, everywhere that's been mentioned here this morning, with the callous disregard that they seem to be, given that there is no transition evident. Because there isn't. There is a slowdown in the deployment of renewables, which is being driven by the accelerated decline that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry today. The Port of Aberdeen, a port that invested millions of pounds in developing South Harbour to take advantage of what they expected to be the boom in floating offshore wind, less than 10 years ago, are laying off workers. They're laying off workers because this boom has not arrived. 63% of that harbour's profit is generated today from the oil and gas sector. Less than 2% is generated from renewables. The decline in oil and gas is being driven too fast, and the uptick in renewables is not there. And it is a cruel irony. It is a cruel irony that we are having this debate today at the very moment, as we speak, that Swire House, a multi-million-pound global energy headquartered building, opened a decade ago with great fanfare in the city of Aberdeen, is being demolished. That is symbolic of this government's approach to our energy industry, to our oil and gas industry, to the city of Aberdeen, the north east of Scotland, and indeed to those workers who worked there proudly, who worked in the North Sea proudly, and are looking overseas. Because as much as the government likes to say that they're going to be increasing funding and expanding the transition fund, these workers that we're talking about are skilled workers, some of whom have spent decades honing their skills in this specific industry. And it is a global industry. And it is an industry that around the world right now, in every country bar this one, is booming. These are people whose skills are in high demand in the Middle East, in Australia, in the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico, take your pick, in South America, in Canada, basically in every country that has an oil and gas industry that does not have the current UK Energy Secretary in charge of energy policy. And that is why they are taking the difficult decision to uproot their families, leave the communities where they have lived all their lives, and go overseas, taking those vital skills that are going to be needed by the technologies of the future with them, and leaving the economy of the north east of Scotland and indeed the United Kingdom weaker as a result. We need to see a change of policy, and surely the result last week in Aberdeen South demonstrated that. People are fed up. They want change. Yes, they agree they want to get to net zero. Overwhelmingly, people believe that we must tackle climate change, but this government's approach, this government's callous disregard for that industry and those workers speaks volumes about where their priorities lie. And if last week didn't demonstrate that, then I don't know what will. So please, Minister, please, scrap the energy profits levy. Do not legislate to ban licences and give the people of Aberdeen, the north east of Scotland, and all those who work in this oil and gas industry hope for the future that this government understands, is listening, recognises, and will invest in that industry moving forward.